that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Now, we did by Disney, Oracle and Lucasfilm, Troya Slice It, Legends. So, you're going to hear some guard work and stuff. I can't do much about that. I'm at work. I would have done it at home, but there was also a bunch of stuff going on with like the road and stuff. So it's noisy everywhere, and I can't seem to escape it. But I wasn't going to be able to read and think being there, and I wasn't going to be able to make my video there, so I left home early, so I don't actually start work now. Anyway, unprofessional as this may be, I'm here to talk about Book 9 of the new Jedi Order. In my opinion, the Empire Strikes Back of this 19-book epic. This is Star by Star by Troy Denning. Now, Troy Denning, since I've come to this community, has become quite a controversial figure within the EU. He's very 50-50 with people. You know, a lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him, and a lot of people just think he's aight. You know? I'll eventually get into the Halo universe. I've already done a couple reviews of a couple books, including Troy Denning, which I enjoyed. And primarily, in basically anything that isn't Star Wars, there is no controversy. He's just generally either well-received or he's alright. Those are kind of the two. The extreme hatred only seems to come from the Star Wars community, which is strange. But in this book, I don't think there's too much to hate on. I'm going to get my one and only gripe with this book out of the way. I think it's too long. I do not think this story needed to be told in 600 pages. I think this story could have easily been told in like 450 at the most. But instead we have 600. So there's a lot of bloat, a lot of action scenes that go fly over my head because I just don't care. And so the book drags a bit. But if you think that's going to be a major diss to this book, you are mistaken. Because I also sat through 2 Hand of Thrawn books, which, I don't know about you, but felt too long. Honestly, what should have happened is that Star by Star should have been 450 pages, and Hand of Thrawn by Timothy Zahn, the great and amazing Timothy Zahn, should have been a single novel. The length of Star by Star should have been the length of Hand of Thrawn in a single novel. But a lot of padding in Spectres of the Past to get us to Visions of the Future so you could have a duology. In fact, if you go to other countries, like if you buy the book from Germany, you're going to be looking at a trilogy. Far too long for what the story presents. Far, far too long. Not necessary. So, seeing as how I can deal with Hand of Thrawn, which was 2 books that kind of dragged on, had highlights for sure, but a lot of dragging, I can get through Star by Star just fine. But what is Star by Star about? Ultimately, and I think I mentioned this originally 3 years ago when I did my first review of this, back when I was a young 19, 20-year-old. If you've ever played the game Mass Effect, and if you haven't, it doesn't really matter. I'm just doing that for those who have, get a little bit of an idea of what's going on here. So in Mass Effect 2, the final mission of the game is this big suicide mission. You do a bunch of companion quests. If you want to, you can skip them, which will determine a lot of things. And you can upgrade your spaceship. If you do none of these things, you're going to have a very bad time on that final level. Because it's kind of this suicide mission where, depending on your choices in the game, everybody can live or everybody can die, including the main character, making you have to make a new character for Mass Effect 3. Now, most people don't suck that much, and most people survive, so it's not an issue. But the point being is that is essentially what we have here, which is a suicide mission. It's not meant to be a suicide mission, they're meant to make it out, but it is a very perilous, very dangerous mission that they're taking on with no guarantees of coming back. Now, the big thing here is that the plan involves not using recognizable people. They want the Vong to underestimate them. The Vong have seen Korn in action. The Vong have seen Luke Skywalker in action. They know Luke Skywalker is the head of everything. They may not know the exact Jedi structure, but they know that Luke is the head of it. And so, with that, they want to get low-profile people. Now, Anakin Solo's been making the rise in terms of his dominance, and Jacen Solo did embarrass Tez Vong Law. But it was not super easy either. You know, it was a spur of the moment, trust in the Force, and poof, did that. But that's not typical for Jacen. So he can still be underestimated. Basically, they just wanted the young blood, the young Jedi Knights. Anakin Solo, Jaina Solo, Jacen Solo, Tahiri, Alema Rar, who gets introduced in this book, which I'll also discuss. Lobaka, Zach, Dimension Tino Ka, Raynar Thul. And the reason they have to go on this suicide mission is because the start of this book introduces us to something that was kind of being set up in the previous two books, but is now fully in fruition. We have the Voxen, which I think of like a rat slash dog slash wolf slash bear. This ginormous monster thing. This thing that its saliva is acidic to anyone but itself. It has massive teeth and massive jaws and large claws, you know, and even when you cut it, like, sometimes it will have, like, this air around it that could also hurt you. So all around, very dangerous thing, and it's constantly going after Jedi. It is a Jedi hunter. It is killing Jedi. And so it must be stopped. They later find out that all these Voxen are being cloned from a source, but of course, the Vong don't use technology. So it's not the type of cloning we're used to, if I've been reading chronological order. This is a biological cloning, which means there's a Voxen queen, which must be killed to make sure that no more can be made, or that will take a very long time for them to do this again if they try. So that's why the mission must go on. And the mission is long, and we lose a few people. One of the biggest ones near the end. And I'll say this, not because Coruscant is also being attacked. I think episode 3, the sacking of Coruscant, except hello. Bah. Somebody said hello to me. But the sacking of Coruscant, but it's the Vong and they're attacking because they're finally trying to make that final push to the core of the New Republic to take over Coruscant. And you're going to hear stuff. I can't do much about that. I apologize. Sorry for the unprofessionality of that. But yeah, that is the essential plot without getting into spoilers. For a time, I started to dislike this book from memory because I was being convinced by other people. And here's what I'll say to you. Never, ever, ever allow a review, even mine, or a Discord server, or anyone else to tell you how you must feel about art, because art is subjective. There are objective things you can find wrong with art, but at the end of the day, art is subjective. What brings you joy, what you find entertaining is yours, and no one can take that away from you. So, I went into this book expecting the worst because I had been convinced that it was not as good as I originally thought it was. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. This is one of my favorite books of New Jedi Order. It's not because it's Troy Denning. From memory, Troy Denning has never been one of my favorite authors. You know, I've enjoyed his work, but it's never been like, that's my favorite. You know? But I enjoy his stuff. Yeah. And I think this book works phenomenally well, you know. I've also heard things like, well, it only works because of the things that Troy Denning was left with, you know, like certain deaths and certain story beats. Like, those were going to be good no matter what. Nah, that's not true. That's not true. Because you could have any story beat can work on paper, pun intended. But if you don't write it well, if it's not written well, then you won't feel it. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find many people who did not feel something from this book. And that's because of the way it's written. You can't argue that it's not. Could other people have made it more? Like, Stover would have been super hardcore about it. We remember his episode 3 novelization. He would have been, with the prose, he would have gone insane. But is that necessary? No. And Troy Denning does a superb job with what we have here. Like I said, my biggest issue is that it's just longer than I think is necessary. You know, but Troy Denning's also a big action guy. He writes for Halo. I've just never been one for action, but that's a me problem. I don't like action. I never have. Not in books anyway. I have a hard time visualizing it. You have to, a certain type of author. There's only a few authors in the EU that have ever made me appreciate fight scenes. Drew Karpyshyn being one of them. But other than that, I think the story works phenomenally well. And of course I recommend it. It's The Empire Strikes Back. This is the darkest moment of the series. Traitor doesn't count. That one's more philosophical, but yes, it's very dark. But this, story-wise, plot-wise, character-wise, is the darkest story in all of New Jedi Order. The stakes are its highest, and the losses are palpable. And if you've been invested in this series for 8 books, this will get to you. You will love it, most likely, or you'll like it. It is good. It's a solid character piece, too, in terms of finally not focusing on the main cast. Like, the main cast are there, but we finally get to see more about the youngins and what they're up to, and what they're struggling with, what they're dealing with. And, you know, the entire parameters of this mission also just kind of fester the dark side. Something I noticed this time around, like, almost everyone is kind of slightly struggling with it, or they're so fearful that they're being too cautious or being annoying. Oh, what's that sound like again? Jason, you know, so it's just a constant thing with this mission. So, but that's pretty much it from a non-spoilers without getting into spoilers. There's a lot to talk about, but I don't want to tell you too much else without getting into spoilers. So, go read this book. If you've been 8 books in, why wouldn't you read this one? You know, there's been a lot of stigma in recent years with this name, Denning, But I'll tell you what, this is one of the most enjoyable reads of New Jedi Order. And I'll tell you this much, I liked it more than the Agents of Chaos duology. I liked it more than Balance Point. Sorry. Don't know what to tell you. Also, Verge. We'll have a lot more to talk about her later. Or Vergier. But Vergier has been getting more prominent since the time of Edge of Victory, and she's a part of this, and she's very mysterious. And I'll have more talked about her in spoilers, but she's in this book, and it's always good to see her, as she's my favorite female character in Star Wars. I think she's absolutely the most intriguing character, too, in all of Star Wars. So, but I'll leave that there, and go read the book, or don't. I don't care, but I'm going to talk about spoilers, and if you don't care about that, or you've already read it, cool, but I gave you a warning, so you can't blame me for anything, but I do recommend it, so go read it. Alright, I have a lot of notes, actually. Start of the book, we get introduced to a few people. Actually, one thing I noticed with this reread that I didn't notice before is we actually got introduced to New Mirar in previous books. It might have just been Edge of Victory, I don't remember. But I know that we've heard the name New Mirar before. So Numa's been a character already. She's been established. That you could somewhat like her with the little appearances she's had. I don't think she's had enough characterization to really feel this death. But I don't think it's really important for you to feel her death so much as to feel for Alema, who we get introduced to in this book. This is her introduction. And she'll be a big character moving forward. for the next couple series, actually. But Alema is a Twi'lek, and she is a Jedi, and she's with her sister, and they're fighting out the Voxen. And during the mission, her sister dies, and she barely escapes. And that's really traumatic for her. And don't take Star Wars seriously. Take it seriously. Da da da. Complain about this. Complain about that. But don't care about it at all. Da 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 da. But then, if you're gonna take it seriously, but not take it seriously, but take it seriously, which you're apparently doing, I don't know. But what I've noticed, trauma is very important. I know that's like a funny word now because like people use it like, oh, trauma. But like trauma is a real thing. And if anything, this book has shown me how much it actually affects everyone. We'll get to Jace and everything. I don't think that the trauma from this is necessarily what brings him to a darker path or anything. But this is something that will be in their brains forever. I want you to realize the severity of what's going on here. Jason and Jaina are 18 or 19 at this point. Anakin is 17 or 18. And Tiri's like a year and a half younger than him. So she's 15, 16 here. Okay. Everyone else is around 18, 19. For perspective, for what these children, I don't care that they're basically finishing high school. Like that's their age range right now. Maybe starting college. That's around the same age that Anakin Skywalker was. And realize that they've been fighting this war for, they explicitly say so in this book, it's been 2 years. So 9 books in, it's been 2 years since this war started. 2 years of constant conflict, and 6 months prior, the Young Jedi Knights had everything with the Shadow Academy, had everything with the Diversity Alliance, had everything with the Black Sun Gang. 6 months later, with some other thing that happened because Jason's acting different, and then all of New Jedi Order. So that stuff is going to stick with you. Anakin Skywalker had Jedi Quest, which sure, that was perilous. There was some danger to them, but none of that. That's basically like a cop show, and compared to all-out war that these kids have been going through already. And the end of episode 2, Anakin's 19, Anakin Skywalker, and that's only when he finally enters a war. But even still, the war against the Separatists is nowhere near the depth of depravity that this war is with the Fallen. The amount of casualties, the amount of blood, the amount of torture, the amount of pain that this war has brought is nothing in comparison to anything in the universe, unless we're counting supernatural encounters, but that's a separate thing. Nothing has been worse than this. This is the darkest war, the harshest war that the Star Wars galaxy has ever and will ever see. Discounting cult encounters. So, these kids have been through it. They've been through more than Anakin Skywalker ever was at the same age. Even including the Clone Wars. They are going through more than he has. Were tortured more than he was during that time. I want you to remember that and understand how important that is for every character involved here. Not just Jason, everyone. You cannot understate how traumatic and how bad it has been for these children. Young adults. Anyway. So we get introduced to Lemma. And I like her here. I think she's interesting. Well, we'll see if that sticks as we move along in the series, but I like her here. I think, she's clearly angry. She clearly is not as in tune with controlling her emotions as other people may be. But she's also nowhere near a villain in this story either. She struggles, but she still is trying to do the right thing, right? She's too focused on revenge, but she still will protect Anakin or protect any of the other Jedi because she's not a villain right now. Nominor Atheist. I love this. Nominor, as we've been reading through these 9 books, it's very clear that he just doesn't care about the Vong religion. hard pressed to say he doesn't. Not only does he not care, he doesn't believe that it's real at this point, which I think is fascinating for him, because almost every single other one of the Vong are kind of, they all have different layers of faith. Like, some of them aren't as faithful as others. Some of them don't buy into everything. But everyone in the Vong culture seems to be religious outside of Numenor. And I think that's really interesting for him. This is where we get introduced to Saba Sabatine. Now, I've also heard complaints about this lady, and I gotta say, I love her here. I think Saba Sabatine's a wonderful character. And, it's another thing of like, oh, there's no strong female characters. Saba's right there. And she doesn't make a big deal about her being a female. She just happens to be a bearable female, and she's awesome. So I like Saba Sabatine. We'll see a lot more of her moving forward in the expanded universe, but I think she's great. And I enjoyed her in this book. The actions that Borsk is taking in this book causes Leia to choose the Jedi path. This is actually very big for a character. It'll be a bigger thing in the next series of the Dark Nest trilogy, but she's been a career politician since she was like 16, and she's basically done with it now. She is giving up. Like, she's just gonna leave it to other people. Like, she wants to finally focus on, her family and her heritage. So from here on out, she's going to be more of an active Jedi role than she has been before, especially after she gets training. Because she'll still do some politicking, but she's done being a politician, which I think is good. Because you know what? Leia has almost as much potential as Luke. Now, she'll never be as powerful as Luke in the expanded universe, but that's only because she started so late, But she's still theoretically just as powerful as Luke, and she deserves to get to have some moments to shine. The one moment in Dark Empire don't count. Or her fighting a damn hut in Planet of Twilight. No. Anyway, but yeah, so I'm excited for that. And it's just showing how far everything's falling apart. And then, did you like Crystal Star? Did you like Young Jedi Knights? Well, in 2 sentences, we get, it's not back to back, it's different times, but Lusa, the Centaur person from Crystal Star, who also appeared in Young Jedi Knights during the Diversity Alliance arc. Lusa's dead. She got murdered by the Vong. You heard about it in hindsight. We get introduced to it because the Young Jedi Knights are crying over it. So, Lusa's gone. You know who else is going to be gone? Lyric from Junior Jedi Knights. She's dead too. I love that though. It really shows, sure, it's not like super big main characters, and theoretically you could do something with them, but there's so many characters in the EU that barely get any, freaking Dash Rendar is probably a more popular character than Lyric or Lusa, but he barely gets anything. So, at least it's somebody we care about, so we can actually feel like they're gone. So I like that though. And of course we get the Young Jedi Knights reunion. Like this, we've had some of the other Young Jedi Knights in other books, like Lubaka's made an appearance. I think Zek has made an appearance. But this is the first time we have Zek, Lubaka, Tino Ka, Jason, Tahiri, Raynar Thal, all in the same room, which was just awesome to see. And another important point here, this will be important for stuff moving forward, but Raynar Thal. Raynar Thal, a friend from Young Jedi Knights, he started to have romantic entanglements, romantic feelings with Lusa. I think they were even kind of dating by the end of Young Jedi Knights. So again, trauma. This is very important. All this stuff, there is so much dark things going on for these children in just this book alone. Not forgetting the 8 books that we already read and stuff that probably happened to those other characters that we didn't read about. Okay? So, Raynor's just lost, as far as he's aware, the love of his life. Okay? So, he's a little bit rude with people right now because he's not in the best mental state. And this boy is not going to have a happy life, I'll tell you that much. So, he's not doing well. And you feel for him. Especially if you read Young Jedi Knights. But, yeah, so it's just a dark time for everybody. I found it interesting, they kind of state that Anakin is more powerful than Jaina. Another thing that this book kind of brings up, and I understand why people do this with fan fiction. The fan fictions with Anakin Solo, because of the potential there. He's kind of being built up to be this Anakin's successor. Sorry, Luke's successor, and then Jason would have died. Like, that was originally the plan. And George Lucas said, no, you have to kill Anakin Solo because I'm going to be making the prequels. Or I am making the prequels already. I don't want the confusion. So they killed off Anakin. But let's still got to get to that down the road. But you see the potential. Like, the most powerful Jedi of this new generation. The successor to Luke. You feel that. So down the line, when we get to the ending, even more palpable that he's now not going to reach that. So I can understand why people want to make fan fictions about that. I just don't like what if stories. I prefer what actually happened. Yeah. Jason Jaina, I wrote it down, I guess, are 19, which makes Anakin either 18 or he hasn't had his birthday yet, which means he's 17, heading toward 18. Because I think to here he's 16. But anyway. We get introduced to the YVH droids, which the best way I can say for visualization is that these droids are Terminators from the Terminator movies. That's what they kind of look like. And they're made by Lando, and they're meant to help the Jedi against the Vong, and they're very cool. Another interesting thing is Jason lectures Anakin about ends justifying the means. We shall get more into this in Traitor, and it's going to be a whole other controversial video for me. But it's interesting because Jason is so against Anakin. Throughout this entire novel, they continue to bicker and fight about what to do. I mean, he does apologize, he does trust Anakin, but he also doesn't. But you gotta wonder, after everything that happens in this book, all the things he goes through in Traitor, all the things for the rest of New Jedi Order, does he not have to start thinking, was Anakin not right? I mean, look, Anakin could do all these things, and he didn't turn to the dark side. In fact, he became one with the Force. Because Anakin really never struggled with the dark side. As far as we see through all these books, he never struggled with it. He feared becoming dark. We've known this from Junior Jedi Knights. But he may be reckless, he may be rash, but everything we see throughout these 9 books, including Anakin, is not really a hint of any dark side. Despite the fact that he may be more assertive than than Luke Skywalker. He may be more assertive than Jason. He may be more willing to do things that other Jedi aren't willing to do. And he needs to actually handle his recklessness. That is a problem he has. But one problem he doesn't have is dark side tendencies. Like, almost ever. He never shows, like, any even hint. Even when Tahiri is being tortured and he has to save her in Edge of Victory, there's not a single moment where he even seems to consider the dark side. And yet he's willing to do more aggressive moves. More aggressive things. He's not even a Mace Windu where he's teetering on that edge. Like, he just is able to do it and be fine. But he's also younger. What would have happened if he lived? Would he have stayed good? Maybe. But you could see why Jason might reevaluate some things. If Anakin can do it, I can do it too. Maybe he was in the right. But Jason's not Anakin. That's a clear distinction. something to think about. As I said before, Verget is becoming a more prominent character. She's been becoming more prominent since Edge of Victory, but she's in a good portion of this. Torture. This is a very hard part of the book. The Vong are torturing one of the Bith Jedi. I don't remember her name or his name. I think it's a her. Bith are the jazz or the jizz music from episode 4. That one. Or Lord or Darth Tenebra from Darth Plagueis. Plagueis, his master. Anyway, I'm just trying to give you a visualization if you forgot what Bith was. So they have the Voxen, and as I said, as acidic, like saliva to anyone but itself. And so they kind of just put the poor Bith's head like underneath the jaw of this Voxen as it starts to drool, and it just starts to sizzle on the poor guy's head. And that's how they're torturing him. I think they're also beating him alongside that, but like not having a good time. And Jaina tells them to stop. They take Jaina out. Jaina's not afraid at all. Jaina's, whatever you can say about Jaina. We finally start to get a little bit more of Jaina because I feel like we've barely gotten any Jaina here. And we'll get more Jaina in the next book, though not as much as I would have preferred. But she's not afraid of this. She's like, go ahead and torture me. And the Vong recognize that it won't do anything if they torture her. They want to torture her, but physically hurting her won't do a thing. Or at least it won't get their desired outcome. So instead the Vong go, that's fine, but you're going to choose for us. Jason or Anakin. And if you make no decision, then we'll just keep torturing the Bith till she dies. It's your choice, though. You have all the power here, Jaina. So tell us. Who do we choose? It's rough. And in the end, she chooses Anakin. Anakin doesn't even cry or scream. He endures it. It's a good scene. We also start to finally get more of this significance of the twins, as their gods involve twins, and so they want to make a sacrifice to the gods using Jaina and Jason, but that requires keeping them alive to make that sacrifice later. This is also kind of a turning point for Luke. He's still not being super aggressive, but this is where he's like, no, we have to actively start making moves against the Vong, which is good to see. And this will only be further to hammer home after this book because of what happens in this book. Jason and Anakin continue to bicker and fight. And it's rough to see because of everything that goes down in this book. But, you thought they were resolved, but they're not really, because Jason's still... I'm gonna hammer this home. He's a prideful guy, and he still doesn't trust Anakin. So he's constantly complaining about it, but eventually he does, want to apologize for the way he's acting, but never really gets that chance. We also get introduced to Lomi Plow. I don't know if this character was actually in Young Jedi Knights. I don't remember by memory, but Lomi Plow is another Darth Mary from the Shadow Academy. That's another thing to keep in mind is the Shadow Academy, because in this book they talk about, Jaina even talks about the traumatic stuff from the Shadow Academy. This will be later iterated in Dark Journey. But the fact of the matter is, again, trauma. They were kidnapped. They were kidnapped throughout their entire life. That's traumatic enough. But it's Star Wars, so you just hand wave it away. It's not a problem, as if that wouldn't affect a child. One, they hardly ever saw their parents because their parents were absentees. Secondly, they got freaking captured almost every other week by dangerous people. And in Star Wars, we hand wave it away, but that's not good for a kid. Let me tell you, in case you didn't know that. So, and then the diversity lines and everything, like, Jaina has so much trauma from all that stuff, plus all the stuff going on with the new Jedi Order. Like, it's something to keep in mind with these characters, with all the progression that they go through, all the arcs that we go through from the rest of New Jedi Order, all the way up to stuff moving on. None of this is... So much of this, in hindsight, easily, any of these people could have gone dark. Some of them do, some of them don't. And I will get to, again, why I think it's so poetic and actually kind of brilliant the way it works here. I'll get to that in the end, but I'm going to move on from now. Anakin gets wounded, saving Jaina. And throughout the book, as we continue on, we're just going to see him get worse and worse. And Han regrets the fact that he never truly apologized to Anakin, and now he may never get the chance. And then, Anakin still has guilt over Chewbacca, over Centerpoint Station. He keeps trying to prove himself. We also know that the Vong are after Ben Skywalker, and so trying to make sure that Ben's okay. So Ben's getting his first taste of being kidnapped, because this just happens to every child, apparently. And then one of the greatest scenes in this whole book, which is Anakin's oneness. Anakin decides to fend off the Vong for the rest of his team while dying. But then the wounds, magically, he stops to feel them, and he becomes this bright light. He becomes one with the Force and does these amazing feats before finally being taken down and killed. Yes, Anakin Solo, the youngest of Han and Leia's children, dies. Now, was that originally the intention? No. But is it powerful? Abso-freaking-lutely. This book is amazing, if not only for that scene alone. Phenomenal writing. It was so good. But I have another thing to mention with this. Oneness with the Force. From memory, so far, Luke has never done this. And as far as I'm aware, never will, unless he does it in Unifying Force. We'll see. I don't remember from memory him doing that. And you think about Anakin Skywalker. He did it once. During the time of the Jedi Trial, I think, that forgettable book during the Clone Wars. But then he turned to the dark side. There's only a few people in the Star Wars Expanded Universe who have become one with the Force. Now, oneness with the Force, most of the time, that's you're dead and you become a ghost, and then you cease to be a ghost and you just become one with that energy. But living beings, only a few have done it, and either have turned to the dark side or die afterwards, not getting to fully utilize that. So I think that will be important to keep in the back of your mind, like a little checklist for later. Jaina and the dark side. It's apparent here that throughout this book, Jaina, of course, Alemarar, Raynar Thal, there's darkness on this mission that's just seeping through everyone. And even if people aren't necessarily showing dark side tendencies, they are being affected by the darkness around them, whether it be from just the mission itself or from the people around them that are kind of surging with it. We get to a point where Jaina gets so upset, especially after Anakin dies, that she uses lightning. And Verge looks disappointed. This is actually important. I think it's interesting that whatever Troy Denning may think about Verge as a character, which I'm not going to get into here because this is behind the scenes stuff, in writing, in book form. This is for now and for stuff moving forward and long into the future. Nothing is explicitly clear within any of the books, outside the fact that she is definitely not a Sith. People can say whatever they want, but the actual character on display, even by Troy Denning, is clearly not a Sith. She looks disappointed when she sees that Jaina's using dark side powers, or that she's using the lightning in anger. I think it's more about the anger thing than the actual technique that she's upset about. But that's also because of my interpretation of Verge that we're not getting into here because we haven't gotten to Traitor. We'll get to that when we get to that. But I think it's abundantly clear that she's not. But it's the mystery of what does she want? Because she's not a Sith, but she's also not being very Jedi. Like, what does she want? What is she? What is her goal? There'll be stuff for later. But Jaina is clearly struggling with the dark side. That's what we know right now. And it makes sense, right? She's a lot more like Han than Jacen is. A lot more brash, a lot more practical, a lot more straightforward, and a lot of subtlety. So she just wears her emotions on her sleeve. She's angry, and she's going to take it to the Vong. Jacen, on the other hand, is focused on the mission. Doesn't want to do anything. Doesn't actually want to kill the Voxen Queen because he likes animals. But he promised Anakin, and it's important that this thing dies so that way it can't be a problem to the Jedi later. So he takes care of that. I should also mention, because I haven't mentioned yet, that this won't really matter till we're done with this series, but Rhaenyra Thal is captured, and we're not sure if Rhaenyra Thal is alive, along with Lomi Plow, and he's, as far as we're aware for this book, assumed dead. So, remember that. Vicky Sesh, I've not mentioned much in this, but she's still being this double agent for the Vong, working in Coruscant, trying to stabilize everything. And she gets an actor like this kid that happens to look strikingly like Anakin. And she has a frick with Leia, and I was just really messed up. Luckily, she meets her demise in this book, so that's amazing. Oh yeah, I wrote down Trauma of the Shadow Academy and Tino Ka. What's nice here is that Tino Ka it's nice. I wish it would have been explored in that 6-month gap, but it's clear that she still has feelings for Jacen, and it may be that Jacen has feelings for her, which is great because they were a great couple, young Jedi Knights, and it was annoying that it was dropped at all. But here it is kind of resurfacing again, which again, props to Troy Denning. Thank you, because they should have been together from the get-go, because they were together at the end of Young Jedi Knights and just weren't at the start of New Jedi Order. But Anakin dies, Jacen gets captured, and basically for the next 3 books it's going to be a year gap, so like the third year, and then Trader will come around and I would just cover that whole year, but from Jacen's perspective. But as far as everyone else is aware, Jacen's basically just gone, and Anakin's dead, so it's just a bad time for everybody. But they make it out. Jaina and the young Jedi Knights, outside of Rhaenyra Thal, make it out. Jacen is captured with the help of Nominor and Verget. Another interesting note is that Nominor is willing to use technology. Again, it's fascinating because he just wants to rise to the top. He doesn't care about how he does it. Picking up an infidel weapon or infidel technology, he doesn't care. It doesn't bother him like it bothers other people, which I find interesting. And Coruscant, of course, is taken over to become Yusan Tar. And the last thing I'll mention is one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. Borsk Vela tries to get Tez Vong La to come down to his office. He doesn't. But he set up this bomb to go with his heartbeat. And they stab him with the ampestaff. Puts poison in him. But the moment his heart stops beating, a huge explosion goes off. He manages to kill 25,000 Vong. No small feat. And since the last time we talking about Borsk Vela, I guess I'll just say, like, he's a terrible dude. With fully just a self-interested heart, but he's not evil. And I think at times he could be genuine, and at times he could genuinely care. Not often, but I do think there were times that he did. And, you know, as Joker once said in The Dark Knight, you know, in people's final moments, you learn who they really are. And I think we got to see a man that ultimately was brave, you know. I'm sure he feared death greatly, but decided if he was going to die, he was going to die on his own terms by taking as many Vong as he possibly could with him. And, nearing the end of his tenure, it seemed like he was kind of getting his own little redemption arc. He was still clearly selfish and moved by self-ambition, but at the same time, he showed, I don't know, and I feel like this has been around since even Izard's Revenge, I think it's Izard's Revenge, where Booster punches him in the face, and he recognizes that he deserved it. I feel like there's more to Borsk than we've given him credit for. He's definitely was started as this hate to love character, but I think there's more complexity there than we give credit for. And regardless, I think he was a phenomenal character. I always enjoyed reading him, even if he was not helping out the main characters and making everything worse. But at the end of the day, he was a great character, and he will be missed, if only for all the hard times and, fun scenes we got with him. So, rip and dip, Borsk Vela, but you went out like a goat. And, forever, this book has always changed my perspective on Borsk, because after this book, I just could never find it in myself to just completely hate him anymore. And that's props to Troy Denning for that. But anyway, so Coruscant is taken, Anakin is dead, Jason is nowhere to be found, and Jaina is turtling toward the dark side of the Force. It is a dark time, it is a low time, it is a time of little hope in the new Jedi Order. But will things turn around? Stick around and find out when I talk about Dark Journey by Elaine Cunningham. Until next time, guys, may the Force be with you. See ya.